What's up, good people? Welcome. We are here. It is our official uh, Chargers draft recap. We will talk about all 9 of the Chargers picked, a little less than they had started the day with, but made a trade up. We'll talk about it. And we will discuss all 9 of them. Jamie, Craig, and I have dove into the tape, watched all 9, and we have some thoughts. And then at the very, very end, we'll go over our grades. I don't know. Do we want to talk about like kind of the draft strategy before we get into it, or you want to do that with the grades?
No, I think start off with the strategy and build from there.
Okay. So how did you feel now that we've seen it and we're past it now after a couple of days? How are you feeling about the draft strategy as a whole, Jamie?
I think overall it worked out pretty well. It seems like they told us early on that they wanted to get 2 pass catchers in the first 3 rounds, and they felt like they did that. They did that. Although I would say I'm not sure I totally agree with their definition of Omari and Hampton as a pass catcher. Not that he can't do that, but not exactly what I envisioned when they talked about getting 2 pass catchers in the first 3 rounds. But overall, I feel like they upgraded the offense. I think Trey Harris is going to come in and produce on some level right away. Obviously, Hampton's going to get a ton of carries and a ton of opportunities to produce. So I feel like they did a good job of addressing probably the most glaring issue with the team. And then they didn't really address corner as early as I thought they would, but they did the next best thing, which was helping out the secondary by trying to address the front 7 with an edge player and an interior defensive lineman. I think my only concern about the interior defensive lineman they got was I don't think they're going to get much, if any, pass rush out of him. And I feel
so you're already starting to break him down. You're breaking these guys down already.
I think overall they addressed pretty much everything they needed to address, and they did a pretty good job of it for the most part. So they seem to have a good handle on what the weaknesses were and what needed to be addressed, and they did mostly a good job of attacking the weaknesses.
Yeah. Craig?
Yeah, they pretty much touched on every position with the exception of really interior offensive line. I mean, they did later, but we don't know how much of an offering this specific player is going to be as far as contributions to the team this year. But overall, I feel like this was a draft where they tried to solidify their identity, for lack of a better phrase. I mean, they're looking to ground and pound the hell of out of a team into the dust and via the running game, of course, and then take strategic shots down the field and then choke you out in the fourth quarter. Everything offensively speaks to that. And defensively, and we'll talk about this as we get into the players, they do have a type, and it looks like the value is more so about bigger, stronger guys as opposed to the more athletic, twitchier guys on the interior of the defensive line. So again, overall, I feel like they did a really good job filling holes and solidifying certain spots. And I mean, they are who they are, and they keep proving it to us. So overall, I'd say I don't have very many complaints strategy-wise. Would I have done a couple things a little bit differently? Sure, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I think we're chomping at the bit here, and I think we need to just get to it, and then we'll go more in depth about draft strategy and all that when we get into grades. So let's just get right into it. So as you guys mentioned, first round at 22 overall, the Chargers select Omari Hampton, the running back from North Carolina. Yes, we will talk about the tidbits that we got from what this pick entailed and where they're looking and how the board fell. We'll talk about it after each pick, but Jamie, well, let's start with Craig. Craig, talk to me about Hampton. I know you covered running backs for our running back podcast. So talk to us about Hampton. Your thoughts.
I mean, overall, it's hard to be mad at getting what would have been the best back in the draft if it weren't for Ashton Genty. And on a lot of people's boards, he was neck and neck with Genty. You can kind of nitpick at that, however you want to feel about it. But with regards to Hampton, again, it's just doing what it feels like Jim Harbaugh wants to do. And it's getting someone who can be the long-term, option as your bell cow back. I mean, he's the ideal style of runner for a power scheme, north and south. You're looking at a potential 3-down player. showed some good receiving ability. He's more than capable as a blitz pickup guy. You saw that on film. He literally destroys guys in protection. It's not always perfect, but he does a very solid job. And when he connects, guys go down or he stonewalls them. He's got like the explosiveness and power to and through gaps, elite contact balance. Talking about a guy who runs behind his pads, strictly no nonsense, so no dancing, but he has a little bit of, make you miss wiggle in the open field. And between both, like just he and Najee Harris, they're going to turn what was already a dangerously efficient play action passing game into a nightmare for the rest of the league when you incorporate like the other weapons they acquired last week as well, which we're going to talk about. As far as, and we've talked about, our breakdowns on where these guys need work, but the only thing with Hampton really that I would say like is a little bit of an issue for me is like, while he does a phenomenal job with pressing the line of scrimmage and then flooring it through open creases, he will sometimes miss a hole and get caught up in the trash between the tackles. So his vision can be a little spotty at times, but just overall, I mean, again, this is your long-term bell cow back, but for at least next year, the possibility of a trio that includes Najee Harris, Amarian Hampton, and someone we're not even going to talk about today, but I'm blown away that they were able to get him as a UDFA, Raheem Rocket Sanders. That's wildly intriguing to me. I know that leaves Kamani Vidal, whom I championed, and Hassan Haskins like on the outside looking in, but hey, them's the breaks.
Well, let's talk about some trades while we're breaking this down. So obviously I know people probably saw that picture today where Hampton looked like he was towering over Harbaugh. That's the beauty of camera angles, but he has a pretty well put together frame, and is more of a straight line runner. You don't see him dancing in the backfield a lot. He is a very no nonsense, one cut and go type runner. Great contact balance because he runs really hard behind his pads. You'll see Hampton run through most arm tackles, stay on his feet when DBs try to throw a shoulder at him. And he displayed some really good patience and vision as a runner as well. Has the ability to get skinny through the hole and also drive out those tough extra yards when you need it. He showed the capability of being a dependable pass catcher. I know Jamie's got some thoughts on them talking about him being a pass catcher, but he had over 500 yards and 3 TDs through the air in the last 2 seasons. And then, like Craig mentioned, he has proven that he could be a workhorse back, especially behind a pretty porous North Carolina line when you watch that Tar Heel tape. But he ran for over 1,500 yards 2 seasons ago, had over 1,600 yards this past season, and he's collected 15 touchdowns on the ground each of the last 2 seasons. Showed us some impressive pass pro reps, though I do believe there is some room for improvement in that area, but I do not feel like he's that far off. While Hampton ran track in high school, he's not really a burner. He does possess some burst, and but when he gets in the open field, you don't really see that like second gear where he's running past guys, and he doesn't really have a ton of wiggle in the open field either. He is just a straight north and south runner, and that's fine. Some interesting tidbits I found out about Hampton. I don't know if you guys saw this too. Hampton went by Big O in high school, and his coaches gave him the nickname Hammer at UNC. So that Hammer moniker will never leave the Chargers till the day we die. Craig's probably a fan of this. I don't know if you saw this, Craig, but he broke his high school weight record. He benched 405, squatted 566, put up 370-pound hang clean, and then his high school coaches actually kicked him out of the gym because he bent the bar. And he was putting up too much weight. And the coaches would not let Hampton back in the gym until he promised that he'd stop maxing out. And so he did, and he came back in the gym. And so, there's also some like tons of examples of Hampton being like a leader. He was obviously a team captain, a high character guy. He was offered a ton of NIL money to transfer. He stayed at North Carolina. There's actually an interview I found where Mac Brown said that Hampton was offered 4 times Mac Brown's own salary to transfer, and he turned it down because he wanted to be with his teammates. He wanted to be with his team and stay at a school. So, obviously a good kid through and through. So, Amarian Hampton is a well-rounded player. He possesses power and vision and balance, and he's got the receiving ability to contribute right away for the Chargers. But, He also has the luxury of teaming up with Najee Harris in the backfield, who's a proven back in the NFL. So the pressure is kind of off of him in year one at the very least. My only real concern is he's not really a dynamic runner, which I fear can kind of limit those big play abilities in the NFL. But Chargers got their back of the future.
Yeah, so you guys hit on pretty much all of it. So I'm not going to go too deep into it. I think you got to love the way he runs through tackles, especially guys when they try to hit him high. He does have really good contact balance when people try to hit him with arm tackles or shoulder tackles. He just runs them right over, and he finishes every run with the intent to punish defenders, which you have to love. He's a broken tackle machine. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He was pretty effective as a receiver. Wasn't really asked to run routes, so to speak. And at the college level, he was more of an outlet. But I think he probably can develop into that kind of a guy. And like you guys said, very physical and willing and effective in pass protection. He just stonewalls guys when he hits him. And I think he's going to be really perfect for the power gap duo system the Chargers run, where he can get his pads going downhill, make one cut and burst through the hole and get the Chargers a bunch of yards. So I think there is a lot to like there. Couple things that concern me. One is I feel like he seeks out a lot of contact and takes a lot of unnecessary hits because of his style of running. He, in my opinion, misses a lot of opportunities for cutbacks and running lanes in the open field because he tends to zero in on the safeties and try to run them over. In some ways, and this is not going to sound like a flattering comp, but in some ways he reminds me of Melvin Gordon. Because of the lack of vision at the second and third levels, and because of the way he runs to contact. What's that?
So we can never escape him.
And he's also, while he does, I think he's got decent wiggle at the line of scrimmage and he can make people miss in the hole. He's not somebody who's going to make people miss at the second and third levels. There's not a lot of wiggle or elusiveness there once he gets going because he is such a linear runner. And there are times where I think he leaves his feet too quickly to try to jump over tacklers and takes hits that he probably shouldn't take. And I'm not sure how effective he'll be running east-west. If he stops his feet or if he has to try to stretch runs outside, he's not quite as effective. But overall, I think he's a very talented kid. I think he's going to be productive in the offense the Chargers run. I just wonder about durability because of the way he seems to seek out contact. And I just wonder if they're going to be able to help him with that open field vision to stretch runs out instead of just running to contact at the second and third levels, and just, look for those additional running lanes when they're there.
So we talked about it on the stream, but when this pick happened, they had 4 guys on their board that they wanted to take. There was Emeka Egbuka, Jahdae Barron, and Derek Harmon, all 3 players taken right before the Chargers picked. So it came down to 4 guys. It came down to obviously Hampton here. They were looking at safety Malachi Starks, wide receiver Matthew Golden, and the edge rusher Mike Green, though Mike Green ended up being red flagged by the team, and they ended up passing on him later, but a guy they had talked about. Hampton was their 18th ranked player and their best player available at that spot. The Eagles, the Browns, and the Saints all called on a possible trade up, like we talked about. Jamie posted all the stuff about the trade details, but the Chargers asked the Browns to give up Njoku and pick 35, and then some late pick swaps. The Saints were kind of just sniffing around to see if that pick was available. And then the Eagles and Chargers had a deal pretty much done, but the Chargers kind of got cold feet and elected to take Hampton because they wanted a true day one starter, and they felt like Hampton was the last one left. They felt the other wide receivers and edge players available had too many question marks, and so they passed on him. And they also knew that shortly after them, were the Vikings and the Rams, and they knew those teams were very high on Hampton. And if they traded too far back, which would have been all the way to 31 with the Eagles, they most likely would have lost Hampton at that point. So they end up going with Amarian Hampton. their quote unquote sure thing at that spot and the only one left. And so now they've got their running back of the future. That's how it all shook out. So anything you guys want to add to that? I mean, we kind of talked about it on the draft stream, but
yeah, I just think we saw the Chargers stick with their board and stick with the identity that they want to create on offense. And as we get into our next pick here, we can talk about how that identity is going to help him be more productive. So we knew what we were getting when they hired Harbaugh, and he told us what he was going to do, and he's doing it. So This is what we asked for. So let's see how it works out.
Man of his word.
Yeah, no lies in Harbaugh. All right, next up here, it is Trey Harris. In the second round, it was 55 overall. They get the Ole Miss wide receiver, a guy that was high on our list when we went into this draft going to the second round, and pretty excited about this pick. So, Jamie, you started to talk about Trey Harris. Let's get into it, because this might be my favorite pick of the draft.
Yeah, so this is a really promising pick for the Chargers. So Trey Harris is 6'2", 205. He is really your prototypical X receiver, can probably play some Z as well. Really good combination of size and speed. He's a long strider who builds speed, so kind of sneaks up on defenders as he runs deep routes. You can see him change the tempo of his releases and breaks to create separation. Has a low center of gravity, change of direction skills, and a second gear that make him really dangerous as a yak threat, particularly in the middle of the field. Really good body control for back shoulder fades and contested catches. And he's really a terror on those slants and crossers and posts and things like that in the intermediate part of the field. He's a guy who comes out of a play action heavy offense at Ole Miss. And they use play action to get him loose deep down the sidelines and in the middle of the field. You could see him fitting into almost that exact kind of role, catching those quick slants, catching the digs, the posts, the deep overs, and then sneaking by people down the sideline off of play action. I think this offense fits him perfectly in that regard. Some things I didn't like. In my opinion, he's a bit of a default body catcher. He drops too many balls in traffic due to letting the ball get too deep. He kind of lets the ball play him instead of him playing the ball. His route tree is a little limited. Basically, you see a slant, a hitch, a go, a post, a dig, and an out. His success rate in contested catch situations isn't quite what you would want it to be for a guy his size, but I think there's room for improvement. There is a lower body injury history. He had a groin issue that cost him several games last year. He's definitely going to need to expand his route tree and refine his route running, and he's going to need to get stronger at the catch point.
So I don't know that I agree with you on the hand stuff. I actually liked his hands, but regardless, this I think is my favorite pick of the draft so far for the Chargers. Not so far, probably in the whole class. I love Trey Harris through the process. I wish we would have covered him on the wide receiver pod, but we did. I don't think so.
Oh, maybe not.
He wasn't one of the first round.
Yeah.
Wide
No,
receivers.
he wasn't. You're right.
No.
So yeah, so he fell out of our list. But man, I love it. So he's got the size and length of an NFL-made, big-bodied receiver. He's got that filled-out frame. He plays with really good play strength. He's got the speed and burst to win deep. And like Jamie was talking about, he's kind of crafty at gaining separation downfield and a long strider. When the ball is in the air, I feel like he fights for that ball. He boxes out DBs, just outworks the guy across from him. And I like his hands, especially like you see him catch balls way outside of his frame, pluck it out of the air when he has to go up and get it. But once he does catch it, he has that burst and kind of that shiftiness to get a lot of yards after the catch. He is that long strider, very deceptively fast. Also showed the ability to be a willing blocker in the run game. He was actually a quarterback in high school. And so they used him on some trick plays in college. And he was actually Malik Neighbors' quarterback in high school, which is a pretty cool fact. I think, like Jamie mentioned, he's got to improve his route tree. It's okay right now, but I feel like his releases could improve. Tends to round off routes at times. I saw the same thing there as Jamie. We also talked about on the draft podcast or the live show that there were some concentration drops at times in college. That did happen. And then the other thing is, like Jamie was alluding to, back-to-back seasons cut short because of injuries. But Trey Harris is a playmaking machine. He had back-to-back almost 1,000-yard seasons. And then in 24, he had 60 catches for over 1,000 yards, and it was only in 8 games. Highly productive. So a big body pass catcher, he wins vertically, can accelerate by you if you give him space in the open field. He is a winner with the ball in the air, helps with big plays, also is going to help in the red zone. And these first 2 picks in Hampton and Trey Harris made a deadly play action duo in back-to-back picks. Load the box, try to stop the run, fake the handoff to Hampton. Harris is off to the races. Absolutely love Harris. And not only as a pick to help the wide receiver room, but also to help accommodate Amari and Hampton, the first round pick, like Jamie was talking about. So I absolutely love this pick. My favorite pick of the draft and for the Chargers. And I cannot wait to see Harris on the field with this receiver group.
Yeah, so definitely a pick that makes perfect sense. Like when you go down the line, you see how each of these players fit, and then you realize when you go back to look at how they were utilized in college, how it pairs up perfectly with what the Chargers want to do. So they definitely have their identity set with regard to the types of players they want and how they're going to use them. They're not asking these guys, to do a situation where it's a round peg square hole, take a guy and force feed him into a system that you're not sure how he's going to operate in. So Harris kind of fits the bill here as well, but he's going to be your new boundary or X receiver post the latest Mike Williams stint. So just prepare yourself for that, whether it happens this season or after the year is up. But I love the way he attacks the ball. I think I feel a little bit more about his ability to catch the ball that Garrett's saying, but we'll get to the other stuff here in a bit. But I think it also depends on which games you watch, because I get the feeling you guys might have watched different games, because depending on what you watch, you'll see a different player with the way that he actually goes after the ball. But I love the way he attacks it with like that bully mentality at the catch point. Aside from just like the high end body control and spatial awareness, this was a key contributing factor as well. But the way that he attacked the ball, again, up high, but he had an above 50% success rate in contested catch situations last year. So it tells me that he definitely has the ability to do it, and he can be consistent about it. I mean, year over year, I think he improved significantly in that way, but last year, definitely, he was a complete hound at going and get the ball. He did get knocked for not having an expansive route tree while he was at Ole Miss, but what he is smooth at transitioning from like his stem to his break. He's fluid after the catch and has the ability to make defenders whiff in space. That 4.5 he ran in Indy, it did come after dealing with the groin injury. And that actually cost him the back third of last season as well. But you don't pull away from SEC DBs running a 4.5. He's definitely faster than that on the field. And he's really physical against man coverage, and he can win without gaining tremendous separation, which is awesome because in the league, those windows are very, very thin, and you have to be the best of the best route runners to gain like a yard or so of separation to get those easy passing lanes. But he's proven that he doesn't absolutely need that. I'd say he's really natural with regard to his feel for settling down in space against zone coverage. And the blocking can be very good when he actually commits to it. Sometimes he's a little bit lazy, but when he knows the play is coming play side, he's all in on it, and he will block until and through the whistle. There are opposite times when he's on the opposite side of the field playing backside of a play, and he doesn't stalk block with like any real ferocity. He'll just kind of put his hands on a DB and then let him go. And sometimes that DB ends up running the play down backside. So it looks terrible on tape. So he just has to commit to it full time and put in that work every single snap, regardless as to whether the play he's play side or not. Now, some of the other things he needs to work on, which is not something I think can change very much. This is just like an athletic trait. His speed is more build up. So he won't ever be mistaken for like a pure vertical threat. I don't foresee defenses like keeping a safety over the top of him in fear of a corner getting like absolutely torched. He can win deep, but more of it's with physicality and high pointing the ball. And one of the things that kept me a bit lower on him than the consensus was the focus drops. There were games where like he would drop wide open passes. Nothing is more frustrating to me than a receiver that drops a pass completely uncontested. Like just focus in, frame the ball, bring it in however you need to. There's no excuse for that. So he just has to clean that up. I would say that he isn't super versatile. There were only a fraction of his snaps that came in the slot, but that's not necessarily where you want him to play anyway. He can give you a little something there. The route tree, it was been mentioned here, it wasn't super expansive. It was heavy on 0 routes or hitches, 2s, which are slants, and 8s, so post routes. And there were some, I said slants already, but last year he was actually like on this torrid pace pre-injury, but a lot of that came against the little children of the poor teams. Like we're talking Furman, Middle Tennessee State, Georgia Southern. I mean, he did go off against Kentucky and LSU, so there's definitely that. And most of all, he's got to stay on the field. I mean, dude is banged up a lot. He will play through injuries if he can, but because he already isn't overly athletic, anything hampering him can like cause him to like his effectiveness to essentially be greatly reduced. But overall, I like what Trey Harris brings, specifically when you're talking about someone who can be very, very effective in play action, because that's literally all he knows. If you can get him to kind of expand that route tree and work in Sanjay Lal, I'm sure that they will, and the guy just stays healthy, you got someone who's going to be perfectly paired with Ladd McConkey and will be able to open up various aspects of the passing game. He's going to get other guys free. And then again, I think he's going to be an asset in the run game if he commits to it as a blocker as well. So another one that, again, I might not be as high on it as Garrett and Jamie, but I do still like the player a lot.
Yeah, but a nice compliment to what they did in the first round, and then with the wide receiver room they've got currently with Ladd McConkey, basically.
I'm curious, sure. Craig, what was your grade on Harris?
So after I went back and looked through everything, I think I watched like 4.5 games. I gave him an 82, so it was a low second round grade.
Which is about where they picked.
I had an 83 on him, so we're in the same ballpark.
Yeah. All right, so going into day 2, there were a lot of players the Chargers liked. Well, there was 5 that they had highlighted. Basically, like, we want these guys when we pick. And we want to leave the second round with one of these 5 guys, hopefully. And the guys were on their board, tight end Elijah Arroyo, the Texas interior defensive lineman Alfred Collins, wide receiver Jaden Higgins, the guard out of Arizona Jonas Avenaya, and the 5th one was wide receiver Trey Harris. I was told that they almost traded up for Trey Harris when Jaden Higgins went, and then Luther Burden went off the board. They felt like there might be the next wide receiver is going to be Trey, so they wanted to move up and try to get him. But Mr. John Spanos talked them down, or at least vetoed any trade that they were thinking about making to move up. Trey Harris fell. There was a comment about Spanos being a calming presence, and that was because he kept talking him down from trading up for Trey Harris. So, yeah. Let the men play.
Yes.
You sit back and
man, good thing it worked out, man. I'm telling you, it was the lucky sweater. It was the lucky Timu sweater.
God, what a terrible sweater, by the way.
He should not be anywhere near draft or football decisions.
No, he should not. And
I thought that was why we hired Harbaugh and Ortiz.
It was part of the deal. We'll give you what you want, but you got to let Tommy in the room. John, not Tommy. Sorry.
John, yeah.
Look at me, Tommy. Get Telesco out of here.
Same.
Yeah. All right. So that was so they got one of their guys, the guys that they felt like they had to have leaving round 2. And so they got lucky that Harris fell and they were able to get him. And so then at the end of day 2, they end up drafting in the 3rd round, 86 overall, defensive tackle Jamari Caldwell out of Oregon. Craig?
Yeah, so I think we were a little shocked at the pick at the time, because at this point we were probably clamoring for like an interior offensive lineman, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So it made sense. They still needed to cover the position, and a lot of the names had gone off of the board. But in just kind of looking at Caldwell, and we watched a few cut-ups of him, just kind of get a better idea of what he's capable of. But after going back and watching a few games, I get it now. So you're talking about like a true 2-gap and nose tackle, but with like the ballerina feet and surprising quickness and balance for a 330 plus pounder, which makes more sense. Like when you learn that he was more of a 3-tech during his time at Houston, but he had to put on weight and transform into like more of a block eating pocket pusher. Ironically enough, though, like his more highly touted teammate, Derek Harmon, actually did the opposite. And at Michigan State, he cut weight, or well, he transferred over to Oregon, but from Michigan State, he actually cut weight to go from a bigger bodied space eater to more of like a one gap penetrator while he was at Oregon. So definitely kudos to Caldwell first and foremost for being willing to bulk up and do more of the dirty work and get far less of the shine, because we know nose tackles aren't as highly valued as their lighter, more explosive counterparts, but he was willing to do what the team needed for him to do. And I'm sure Harbaugh and company value that tremendously. But as far as the on-field play, first things first, he won the majority of the leverage battles in like the 3.5 to 4 games that I watched between Sunday and today. I mean, the dude's 6'2", so he's kind of sort of a tweener in height, but he almost always explodes out of his stance and underneath interior offensive linemen's pads. I lost count of the stalemates and the number of times he forced centers to have to transition into anchoring almost immediately post snap. He's got really good pop in his hands when he wins off the line of scrimmage with quick hands and the power to kind of just shock offensive linemen into the backfield. The first step quickness, it often caught interior guys by surprise early in contests. It's probably because he just doesn't look like someone who can threaten you with a finesse game, but he definitely does have it in his bag. He's a tremendous run defender. When he wins with quick hands, like on the inside, he follows it up with eyes in the backfield, and he'll stack and shed and immediately wrap up a ball carrier before they can make it to the second level. He stays super low against double teams, so he'll hold his ground, and he'll even get skinny to split them, which is wild to say about a dude that's built like him at 330 pounds. There's nothing skinny about that. But where he needs improvement, again, there's really nothing you can do about this. He's got shorter arms, so that definitely affects his ability to finish plays at times. You'll see him miss some tackles because of it, because, I mean, defenders, like, if they've got long enough arms, they can just essentially stiff arm him and, like, goes completely T-Rex arms because he can't reach out to them. As a pass rusher, he doesn't really have a secondary move. He either wins with like the bull rush or the first step. So if he gets stopped immediately, he's basically just occupying space, and he's still figuring out the finer points of hand usage. He only has like a rip and an arm under move from what I saw. That's about it. But again, this is just like 3.5, 4 games. And overall, like I mentioned before, what's become, shut up, my phone is charged. Thank you for telling me. What's become like exceedingly obvious to me is that Harbaugh values size and strength over quickness and athleticism on the interior of the defense. If you can offer some semblance of both, great, but the former is almost always going to take priority. So again, I get why they like Caldwell. His ceiling probably isn't super high, but the floor is, I think so. And like, as far as that, rotation on the inside, they're going to be about stopping the run. And if they get to the quarterback, it's going to come through pushing the pocket and forcing the QB off his spot, which Caldwell can do. But they clearly have a type when they're talking defensive linemen.
Jamie?
Yeah, I think Craig hit on most of it. He's got a very powerful frame with a low center of gravity. His length would be a problem on the edge. It's not so much of a problem inside, just because most of the interior linemen have this similar reach as he does. I think he's got the potential to be an early 2-down player early in his career. He's going to stop the run. He's going to eat up space. He can penetrate when he needs to. And like Craig mentioned, for a guy who's 6'2", 335, somewhere in that ballpark, he is surprisingly quick. He can cross the face of linemen, leap from gap to gap. He plays through the whistle. I saw a club, a swim, and a stab for early wins. His swim is probably his go-to. The hands are pretty strong, and they stay active. He uses them to soften the edges of blockers once he's got an advantage. And I think he's got the potential, surprisingly enough, to produce in stunts. Because of his quickness and because of the way he uses his hands to soften the edge, I think you could probably surprise some teams with that. Weaknesses right now, he has to be schemed to the quarterback. He's going to be a pocket pusher early in his career. He's not going to be somebody who's winning early and getting to the quarterback, but he might affect the quarterback by, bench pressing and throwing offensive linemen into their lap. He can play with limited bend in his legs at times. He'll start out reps early, legs will straighten out, and he'll kind of wear down and get pushed back a little bit. He does have a tendency to wind up on the ground a little bit too often. I noticed some of the issues with tackling too. I think it's a reach issue. It's also a body control. He seems to have a hard time breaking down and closing guys out when they're in the immediate area. He's not a pass rusher, so this isn't a surprise, but he lacks a rush plan and counters to get to the quarterback. And like I said, not really likely to be more than a pocket pusher at the NFL level, at least not early if you're not scheming him to the quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, you see the big body, and he's going to be, the prototypical nose in the NFL. But he's got a really quick first step, and Craig, I know already alluded to it, but it feels like his strengths are he explodes off the line, and then he generates really good leverage with his strong upper body and has the ability to anchor in the run game. But he showed off such good pop in his hands. And when he explodes off the line and he gets those mitts on you, he puts those interior O-linemen in a pretty tough spot. So like you guys mentioned, he was a former edge. He got flipped inside. So, we get to see some nimble feet on tape as a pass rusher. We saw a good bull rush, which means, like Jamie's alluding to, be a pocket pusher. I liked his swim move, which he added to his repertoire. And with those quick feet, showed really good agility, like scraping the line of scrimmage and then chasing ball carriers sideline to sideline. I think what really hurts him is his arm length. They're below average, and it hurt him as a pass rusher. It hurts him when he stacks and shed. And it feels like if he doesn't get those hands on you early, he's chest to chest with an O-lineman, and then he doesn't really have much of a plan of attack after that. You see the pass rushing flashes, but all of his sack production came as an edge rusher. He had 0 sacks at Oregon last season. He had 5 tackles for loss, and he actually had a pretty unique path to the NFL. He was not ranked at all out of high school. He went to 2 separate community colleges. Then he transferred to Houston, where he became an edge, then transferred to Oregon last season and became an interior lineman. But he was actually a running back in high school, played left guard, played left tackle, then flipped to defense in community college. He ballooned up to 360, had to get his weight down, and then went to Houston, and then got his weight back up to play in the interior. So he's an older rookie, kind of growing into his position. And Jamari Caldwell, or the self-proclaimed dancing bear, which I loved that he called himself, is just kind of a testament to hard work and perseverance to where he is. As a Charger, he's going to be a 2-gapping man in the middle. He is strong, stout, has some flexibility, has a size, power, and ability to contribute early, but we'll also need to keep adding to that pass rushing bag, be more consistent against double teams, maybe a rotational guy early while he develops, while he keeps adding more to, and then you can kind of add more to Caldwell's plate throughout the season. But what is your guys' take on like his outlook year one? Because while watching him, I think he's further along than Aboigbe was, but it does kind of feel like the same, like, year one, he's going to be a work of progress. You could maybe get him on early downs in the run game. But, and again, he's further along than Aboigbe was. But where do you guys see like his role year one in the interior?
I think he probably has a chance to earn some snaps on first and second down. They're not super deep or super talented with true run stopping defensive tackles.
Sure.
Aboigbe is more of a 5 tech, in my opinion, maybe some 3 tech. The other guys they brought in this year, they're fine. They're space eaters, they're veterans, but they're probably not going to be here very long. So I think there's an opportunity for him to earn snaps slowly over the course of the year and maybe knock out one of the guys they brought in. And I'm blanking on their names. That's how good they are.
Are you talking about
Naquan Jones?
Naquan Jones and
Hand.
the guy and Hand. Yeah.
Yeah. Deshaun Hand.
I wanted to call him Norman Hand, and I knew that wasn't right.
Yeah,
not much difference there though.
Hand, still Tito, still Tart. Still
I mean, there's just not a lot outside of Tart. There isn't anybody on that defensive line that I look at and like, oh, he can't beat them out.
Right.
So, If he comes in and plays well, I think there's an opportunity for him to at least be in there on first and second down.
Yes.
And then you rotate him out on third down and give somebody else a chance to come in and chase the quarterback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
I think a lot of it depends on, well, I think he's going to be a first and second down contributor off the bat
Mhm.
because right now, just his skill set, he offers something that none of the other guys currently on the roster do at a very, very high level. When we're talking just pure nose tackles, I mean, Igbonya, Tito has
Tito.
the size to do it, but I don't necessarily think he has the functional strength to operate at a high level as a nose. So I could see him really being used in tandem with Tier Tart pretty often because it feels like right now Tart's going to be your best interior pass rusher, and they may be looking for more from him in that way this season, where he was kind of gaining snaps as the year went on last season. I think he's going to have a more pivotal role. So for me right now, if we're talking Caldwell, easily first and second down contributor, pocket pusher, run stopper, but they're going to ask him to be the tree stump in the middle of the defense to allow the other guys to do work. And I mean, he proved he can do that while he was at Oregon. So I think there's a very good chance that he earns early snaps and becomes just a consistent guy in the middle. They've not had this in years, by the way. So it feels like they're getting the immovable force in the middle of the defense, and they're just going to work around them. There's clearly faith in a Boygby. I mean, based on last year where they drafted him and said that they saw him as a second-round pick. So they're probably hoping to see a big step up from him as well. But as far as Caldwell goes, yeah, I would not be shocked to see him on the field early and often.
Yeah, and I think you guys are right. I think you see like an early first down reps for Caldwell, seeing him rotated in and out, and I get that. I just feel like while watching him, I feel much better about this defense if Poona Ford's still in the middle of it. And I get it's a moot point because he's not there, but Caldwell feels like a great addition if he's rotating in behind a guy like Poona Ford, and you can get some extra juice, or you need that extra guy to stop the run early on. And I think you have a little bit more confidence in the defensive line because well, it's good that you're going to put a lot on his plate. You draft him in the third round. I get that. Put him in. But also, I'm feeling more comfortable about this team if the Chargers actually have some kind of interior pass rushers, and then you're rotating in a guy like Caldwell rather than immediately putting him in as a starter and saying, "Hey, Rook, time to go to work." You know what I mean?
It kind of feels like they expect him to be the Poona replacement. Just based on what you're seeing from him on film, and we're talking about someone being a pocket pusher, I don't think they just see him as someone who can stop the run. He won't be a high level, pass rusher, but he can be disruptive. Like even during the Senior Bowl, you saw during some of those one-on-one reps. Even if you go back to Houston, you saw what he was as a pass rusher. He was much more of a pass rusher then. I think they know that that's still there in him, and they're going to ask him to do a little bit more of it, but first and foremost, it's going to be, hey, stop the run. Sometimes you're going to have to take on some double teams and let the linebackers stay clean and allow them to scrape and make plays. But I wouldn't be shocked if they view him as more of a Poona Ford replacement.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible. And, they got Tier Tart after the draft last year. So there's a chance that they can still add to that group. But I feel like this group is still a work in progress even after the draft. And we'll talk about that when we get to grades. But they knew at the end of the second round, Shamar Turner and then Omar Turner-Lott went at the very end of the second round. I think it was to Chicago and Kansas City, back to back. So once they felt there was going to be another defensive line run, much like with the wide receiver run, they got a little nervous and they kind of zeroed in on defensive line in the third round. They were really big fans of Darius Alexander, who I think went like 2 or 3 picks after that. I think it was the top of 3, like the first pick in the third round. But they had Jamari Caldwell as their next interior defensive lineman on their board, even though one went before Caldwell. So they got the next best on their board, and they helped out the interior defensive line, which is obviously a point of contention with this group in the front office because they got a Boygby last year in the 4th. Now they've got Caldwell in the 3rd. They want to beef up that line, and they're building inside out, which is great. And I cannot in any way, shape, or form go with this comment. Somebody did it on Twitter.
Yeah, stop that.
You knew it was going to happen.
Stop that.
He is not Jamal Williams. The only person that's Jamal Williams is Jamal Williams. So let's not do that. Like ever.
But again, just making reference to this They clearly have a type because
Love you,
all
Brian.
of their targets, the way the board fell, you naming off
Mhm.
like Alfred Collins, guys like that, they all
Mhm.
have similar games.
Darius
Like they're all
Alexander.
power. Yeah, they're all power and mainly run defense first. And
Mhm.
they give you a little bit of pass rush, but they don't have like a ton of juice. So it seems like, again, they had them in order, but they all have very similar skill sets. So Caldwell just ended up being the third guy on the list there.
Yeah. And no knock against the player. I'm just saying as a position group, I still feel like there's some room to improve there.
It's a continual work in progress.
Yes.
And the one thing that I felt they really needed to get either in free agency or the draft was an interior defensive lineman who could get to the quarterback. And they didn't do that.
Mhm.
I really thought they would, based on some of the issues they had facing defenses that had guys like that last year. I really thought that'd be a priority because I feel like while their edge group is solid, I just think they need to re-envision how they go about getting after the quarterback, because so many of the elite quarterbacks are not really affected by edge pressure unless they get home for the sack.
Yep.
You need to push the pocket. You need to make them move their feet, disrupt their vision, make them look. It's like it's the way they affected Joe Burrow in the first half of that Cincinnati game last year, where they were pushing guys into his lap and he was looking at the pass rush, not at the secondary for most of the first 2.5 quarters of that game. They need more of that. I just think having somebody who can get home from the interior changes the way teams have to scheme for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you absolutely have to get pressure up the middle of the defense towards the quarterback, because what you want to do is force them off their spot so they only have half the field to work with. So you're talking about quarters, especially the ones that aren't super mobile and can't buy time. If you force them out of the pocket to the left or the right, and they're maybe only have 2 or so options to get the ball off to, if you've got the proper defense called, it's easier to shut that down, especially if we're talking about guys who aren't like Josh Allen, who can gun the ball, 40 yards to the opposite side of the field with no problem. There aren't very many of those in the NFL. So yeah, interior pass rush is a quarterback's worst nightmare, and it just feels like they view it differently. And I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's just like old hat way of thinking, but they have to find a way to generate more pressure up the middle of the defense without having to manufacture it through blitzes.
Yeah. And so, we will see. It's a work in progress. This is a guy who had his first year going to the interior defensive line. And while it's possible he can get after the quarterback, he had 0 sacks last year in college. You'd think that that's, something that would translate to the NFL and probably carry over, where he's not really getting to the quarterback, but it's possible. He was an ex edge rusher, and maybe they coach him up and he can get after the quarterback. But you wouldn't say coming out of college that's one of his calling cards or that's a strength of his. So while it's something he could definitely build on, it's just, I think it's a testament of the interior defensive line as a whole, this whole conversation, that, it's still a work in progress. They will keep building it out. It's just Telesco left them with a really, really bad bag, man.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to take a couple years to get that right. So let's move on. And we move on to day 3. It is Kyle Kennard. They drafted the South Carolina edge defender at 125 overall in the 4th round. Craig, talk to me about Kennard. He was on your list. You liked him.
Yeah, so value. The Chargers literally got the SEC Defensive Player of the Year and Bronco Nagurski Award winner in the 4th round. So, I mean, do with that what you will. What I noticed about Kennard most is he definitely studies film, because in like the 4.5 or so games I watched recently, I counted 12 separate times that he successfully guessed the snap count and got ahead of tackles on the outside. He's got really easy speed to power ability. He sets tackles up to fear him beating them to the outside, and then he would stab with his inside hand and arm to use like their backwards momentum against them, and he'd force his way into the inside rushing lane between the guard and the tackle to close the airspace on the quarterback. So I really appreciated that. It shows like some growth as a pass rusher that he's had through the years, because he's typically just been like an outside running the hoop type guy, and last year I saw a little bit more versatility. He does weaponize that arm length in his rush plan, and it he uses it to get his hands on balls in passing lanes, not just a long arm guy. So again, I'm seeing him continue to develop as a player, and different, tools that he has in his bag that he's utilizing. And he looks like he hits another gear once he wins the edge. He closes on the QB in a heartbeat once he beats tackles around the edge. So right now, he feels like someone who's going to contribute at a very high level as a pass rusher primarily on the defensive side of the ball for the time being. Now, where he needs work is the functional strength is a bit concerning. Like once a tackle locks him up, he has an extremely difficult time shedding. And essentially he has to count on the play being extended so that he could potentially get a second chance to make like an effort play. You don't want to depend on that. I don't think he's a terrible edge setter, but once he loses sight of the ball carrier, he has no feel for the flow of the play, and he will either be blocked out of it or take himself out of position, like in an attempt to circumvent an offensive lineman. Again, this is sort of kind of due to the lack of functional strength, and it really also hinders his ability to stack and shed consistently. He's another guy who either wins with his initial move or he finds himself playing patty cake and essentially out of the play. So he's still needing to grow there. And he's going to have to be a situational pass rusher, like I mentioned, year one. Like while he develops a wider array of moves and improves his overall strength, he's going to be pretty limited, but it's a good thing. You're getting to play alongside guys like Khalil Mack. That should help his cause significantly. But overall, I think he provides some juice and length off the edge, which the Chargers desperately need, as they don't really have much of that from either of the top three edge rushers. So day one, he brings you a little bit of something that's absolutely necessary for a team that needs more overall speed on the defensive side of the ball, even though they're really sound from a technique standpoint. The edge rush isn't as dependable as you would like it to be in key situations. And I feel like those guys get worn down pretty easily. I mean, Khalil's a little bit older. Bud Dupree is no spring chicken either. And Thule wins a lot with effort, but he's not very, very explosive. So again, Kennard gives the defense something that it lacks. Well, two things: the speed, juice, because he's not super fast. He's twitchy when we're talking about like first step quickness and closing once he finds a lane to the quarterback. And he also has really, really good length. So those things combined with what currently exists in the room, which is mostly power, I think is going to be a good match.
Mm-hmm. Jamie?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything Craig said. I think the biggest takeaways for Kennard are there's three of them. He's got the length, he's got the quick first step, and he's able to bend and dip below tackles to get home. And those are things that I feel like they're missing. Mack is a power rusher. Thule is a guy who wins with technique and effort, and they scheme to the quarterback. Kennard is a guy who I think as they continue to develop the hands and the technique, he's going to be able to win early a lot, which is something that Mack and Thule don't do as much. Yep. So going into the offseason, I felt like this was a group that really needed to add some juice. They needed some speed, guys that could win with their first couple of steps, some bend, some length. And I feel like they got that with Kennard. He's developmental. Yes, he was super productive in the SEC. But like Craig said, there are some kinks in the armor, as you would expect from a fourth round pick. And this is not to say he's not going to be a good football player, because I think he will be. But things that stood out to me is when he's running the hoop, heavy-handed tackles can knock him off track really easily. The contact balance and the functional strength isn't really there. I think he can develop better understanding of blocking schemes. Like Craig said, if he doesn't win early, the rush kind of stalls out and he winds up dancing with the tackle. The rush plan needs to develop, and the counters need to develop, and I think they will. My last note on him, he's probably only going to be a situational rusher early on. So yeah, we're pretty much on the same page. I think he's going to, I could see situations where he and Thule and Mack are on the field at the same time, and maybe he and Mack are lined up on the same side of the line. They run some games to get Kennard a wide open lane in the B gap. And he's going to beat guys around the edge just because that's how he wins. So yeah, I think it's a really good, promising fourth round pick. It addresses a major need they had in their edge group, and it just shows that they're aware of what they're missing, and they continue to find ways to add in those areas.
Yeah, the length, obviously, the explosive first step helps him win. Loves how he converts speed to power. The agility, lateral quickness, and then we see some big boy strength at the end of it at times. As a tackler, he's got pretty good technique, and it feels like he might be peaking as a pass rusher. When, it feels like watching the LSU game, he really gave it to that first round tackle, Will Campbell. And so going against, NFL talent like Will Campbell and still being able to be effective, he is an older rookie. He played 4 seasons at Georgia Tech before transferring to South Carolina this past season. But, it felt like watching him at Georgia Tech, he was starting to put it together. And then he started to really break out in 23 with Georgia Tech. And then absolutely exploded this past season with like 11.5 sacks and 16 tackles for loss, which earned him the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. But Kyle Kennard needs to add more to his pass rushing attack, improve his counters, like Jamie mentioned. I think he does need to improve as a run defender as well, but they've got a lengthy edge who can convert speed to power, has the production and the athleticism to be, in a few years, a high upside type edge rusher at this spot. Let him be a rotational guy early. He's going to be edge 4 behind Dupree and Thule and Mack, which is great. But once, Mack and Dupree are gone next season, you've got Kyle Kennard and you've got Thule, which you hope at that point Kennard has developed enough to be a edge 2. So feels like, rotational guy early on, which is totally fine. You got some starting edge upside here with some development. And a kid that I think in the 4th round is a really, really good pick because it helps complement, like we talked about, complementing Trey Harris with his wide receiver group and Amarian Hampton. And then Amarian Hampton helped complementing this offense. Feels like Kyle Kennard as a speed rusher helps complement these power guys and this kind of technique guy in Thule. And just adding something that they need, an extra juice that they need off the edge. And so the Chargers felt like Kyle Kennard, they had a 3rd round grade on Kyle Kennard. There were 3 edges that they had ranked above Kyle Kennard. They had Princely, who was taken earlier. They had Josiah Stewart, of course, the Michigan kid. And then they had Jack Sawyer, who was taken a couple picks before the Chargers. And then their next edge guy on their board was Kyle Kennard. That's ahead of guys like Jordan Birch, Savion Jones, David Walker, Baron Sorrell, all guys taken before Kennard, but Kennard was their next favorite edge player there, and they got him in the 4th round.
I am so glad they got him over Jack Sawyer.
Sawyer, yeah.
So glad. Talk about not addressing your needs at all.
You're talking more of the same is what that would have been.
But just worse.
Yes. Jeez. It's funny because Princely would have been fun for all the juice that he has. But I was curious, what do you guys have Kennard graded as? Because I actually had him as a mid-3rd round pick at a 75. So it's interesting that they saw him similarly.
I had a 72 on him.
I actually didn't wind up doing a grade for him.
Okay.
I would say, I like him. I would say probably 73, 74, somewhere in there.
Yeah. So we're probably in lockstep with the Chargers there, being a 3rd round value. Well, it sounds like kind of coach speak and fluff. I graded him like fairly, and he got a 72 from me. So that's a 3rd round grade, and they got him at the bottom of 4. So,
value.
No favoritism or anything there. All right. So then after the 4th round pick, they double dip at wide receiver, and they pick Keandre Lambert Smith, the speedster out of Auburn, in the 5th round, 158 overall. Jamie.
So it's actually, I watched some of his Penn State tape and I was like, oh my God, I hate this guy. He wasn't blocking. He wasn't running routes. He wasn't catching the ball. It just looked like he was totally disinterested. And then you watch his Auburn tape and you're like, wow, there's actually something here.
Yeah.
He played a lot of Z and X at Auburn. Some slot. I think he's probably going to settle into being more of a Z receiver and maybe a little bit of slot. at the NFL level. So the versatility there is really good. He has really good and surprising body control for contested catches for a guy his size. He attacks the ball at the highest point, catches the ball with his hands, and makes some really impressive contested catches. Does a great job of working back to the football, fights for the ball when he has to. He tracks and adjusts to poorly thrown balls like a center fielder. His hands and catch radius, I thought, improved dramatically from 2023 to 2024. He's another guy who chews up yards when he catches the ball in stride between the numbers. He got much better as a blocker. I thought he was pretty willing and physical and technically sound as a blocker in Auburn, not so much at Penn State. And he's able to create a lot of deep separation, makes a lot of plays. I think he averaged right around like almost 20 yards a catch last year on 50 catches. He was pretty phenomenal in terms of creating big plays, and he did it outside. He did it inside. The route tree, little limited, go, slant, post, out, curl. He'll round his routes off every once in a while when he doesn't think he's getting the ball. So there can be a little bit of a lack of focus and attention to detail with his route running. So plenty of room to improve there. He will allow corners inside his frame on outs and curls. I think there are times when he tips those routes and corners know it's coming and they'll run right through him to get to the ball. He is unlikely to break tackles or make many people miss, in my opinion. And I guess the big question for him, since he's going to be, pretty far down on that wide receiver depth chart, is he going to be in a position to earn his way on the field on special teams? Because if you're a wide receiver 4, 5, 6, somewhere in that area, you kind of have to be able to cover and tackle or return. And I'm not sure he's going to provide that value.
Yeah. So I'm with you. When I started the Penn State watch, I was not very happy with this pick. And then once you get to Auburn, you start to see the progression and the jump, and you start to see a lot more there. And Lambert Smith showed some fluid mobility. We saw some straight line speed as a deep threat. I was really, really impressed with his contested catches.
Me too.
He is a smaller, skinnier wide receiver, but somehow would go up and moss DBs. And I could not believe they would throw him jump balls. And I just couldn't believe that he was there. That he was there in the vicinity to make that play. When coming back to the ball, he shows good timing with really good hands in the open field. He showed off some shiftiness to get yak, and he's got the speed to run by guys. And I feel like he's got a really good feel for open space in any of those backyard football situations. Like whenever his quarterback was scrambling, he was like the QB's best friend, working back to the ball, getting open, getting able to get there and make a catch. Like Jamie, like you were talking about, if he's got a free release, he can do damage. But if corners get their hands on him, he really has a hard time getting going. And then obviously, like you said, his route running is hit or miss, kind of choppy in and out of his breaks. It's going to have to work on his route tree. Lots of goes, curls, comebacks. You mentioned it. And he's also another one of those fifth-year seniors. He played 4 years at Penn State, transferred to Auburn in 2024. So Keandre Lambert Smith, a.k.a. K Lambo, which is one of his nicknames. Also, Big Play Dre. And also, if you didn't know this, Cam Chancellor's actual nephew in real life showed off some real speed and mobility in college, had some good timing in his routes, strong hands, some yak ability. I think he's got to extend his route tree, improve his play strength in the run game. We saw it improve a little bit at Auburn, but still is a work in progress. But you got another speed option here for the Chargers, which is nice. But I'm really curious about special teams as well, because we're going to get to a couple of guys here at the end of this draft that are very special teams worthy and has the experience. Where does Lambert Smith fit in? We will see. But, they needed some more gas in this wide receiver room. They needed Herbert to get some more help. This seems to be one of those picks to kind of help remedy that situation and add some speed, which they absolutely need. Craig?
I think Garrett, right before this pick, we were sitting there expecting it to be Miles Frazier because he was available at that point. And so we went from the interior offensive line pick that we thought was going to be in the third round to now sitting there in the fifth and being like, okay, it fell to you again. Take advantage of it. So when they went wide receiver, I think we were a little shocked. And also, you spoke to the contested catch ability. No joke. Every time he made one of those highlight contested catches, I got pissed at Quentin Johnston. He had nothing to do with it at all. But I'm like, this dude is 6'1", like 180, and he can pull this off. And, I just had to stop myself and remember what it was actually about. But conversely, I still think this has a lot to do with Quentin Johnston. You don't draft 2 wide receivers for no reason, but, different conversation. Yeah. So I can see the play action deep shots from Herbert to KLS already. This is a vertical speed threat that the Chargers have been missing since Tyron Johnson, I guess. Sorry, not sorry, Jalen Guy. You don't get any burn in this. I think he's an underrated route runner, actually. And also after the catch, like in space, though. He's not going to break a ton of tackles. Guys already touched on that. He does a great job with the tempo of his releases to his stems and then into his breaks. So corners are often bailing too early because they fear getting stacked and trailing. And if he's in front of you, you're not going to catch him. So this leaves him open for space when he goes into the breaks of his routes. So you'll see him get into outbreaking routes, ends, even curls and comebacks with almost no corner in the frame because they're dropping 5+ yards because they're in fear of him stacking them and them getting burned. I think the dude's a big play in waiting, but how do I say this nicely? The Auburn QB play was darn near. It was gag inducing.
It was so bad.
I hated having to be subjected to it. I think it also maybe negatively impacted his draft stock just for lack of opportunities, because when the kid got the ball in his hands, he was a difference maker. And when the QB put the ball on him, good things happened. It just didn't happen often enough. I think the Chargers are going to end up benefiting from that drop, because I saw a guy that could have easily been like someone who snuck into the late second round or early third if he played with literally any other team other than Auburn this year. So some of his best performances also came last year against SEC opponents, i.e. there was the Georgia game versus A&M and Alabama. I think he went for over 100 in each of those games, except for maybe A&M, where I think he went for like 95, but he averaged over 100 yards receiving in each of those games. Of those games collectively, he averaged 100 yards. So he can also make some really fantastic grabs. Guys already spoke to it. So he doesn't necessarily need to be open to secure the pill downfield. He can go get it. Now, there are areas that he needs to work on. He's definitely slight. I think he weighed in at over 190 pounds at the combine, but I'm not buying that as his playing weight. Bigger and stronger corners that aren't really spooked by getting beat vertically, they can body him up pretty easily. And his hands are somewhere between, collectively, they're between average and just okay. Like, he makes some really fantastic catches, and then some other ones like, dude, how did you not reel that in? So basically, the receiving ability is sort of a mixed bag. It's not as bad as some other people's, but this is not about them. I keep having to remind myself. I think I counted 4, maybe 5 routes over the 4 games that I watched, so I need more from him there. Although I think that was more of a product of the Auburn offense than anything. He will compete as a blocker, as Jamie mentioned. I don't know how much I expect of a return on that investment, though. He has some technique issues, which could be cleaned up. I just think because of the lack of size, he's going to get just run through at the next level. He's going to have to add some strength. That's kind of a reoccurring theme amongst a few of these guys. And there's actually another one on this list we'll get to in a bit. He doesn't really offer you anything from a special teams aspect from what I saw. So again, it makes you wonder what the plan is for the wide receiver room, because typically if you were talking about like a back of the roster wide receiver, they tend to have to offer you something on special teams. Now, unless they're going to give him a shot to be like a returner to see what he can do there, there's really nothing in college that proves that he can. So you're probably looking at him to actually contribute offensively. And Sanjay Lal apparently really likes him. And I think I see the vision for him pretty early on as a guy who opens up things underneath Fallad and potentially Quentin Johnston. But I think there's more to this pick than him just being like a speed guy you got in the 5th round. I think Law sees him as somebody who can be a vital part of the offense in the next couple of years. And it could actually start this year.
I mean, like I said, he's probably the most natural fit as a Z. And right now, they're developing somebody else at Z. So there should be opportunities for him to get on the field and make some plays and hopefully at least force QJ to step up his game on some level.
Yeah.
I don't see any reason why he can't be on the field this year in that play action heavy offense, making plays down the field for the Chargers.
So this was a pick, as Craig was going to say, I was just going to mention. In the room, this was Sanjay Lal's one of his favorite day 3 wide receivers. They really felt as a collective that they needed more speed in the room. And they also believe that KLS is going to be a better pro than he was in college. They just see a major progression, and they feel like what you've seen of him is just the tip of the iceberg. They also said, and take it for what it's worth, they said he was drafted because he's going to compete in camp, and he is strictly and going to be Mike Williams and Quentin Johnston competition in camp. A speedster they want to add to the wide receiver 3-4 competition and to help push Mike Williams and Quentin Johnston.
Mike Williams is an interesting name.
Well, I mean, he's coming off an injury. He did next to nothing last year. They're like.
I just mean the play style, the body type, and what they'd be asked to do. Because Mike's
no, they're not saying a replacement. They're saying it's competition. Like Mike Williams for the roster spot.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
On the depth chart,
because they have an X now that they drafted. So
gotcha. No, competition wise.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give them credit. We've been talking about it through this whole draft, and it was a theme through last year's draft. They understand the areas they need to be upgraded, and they're making an effort to upgrade, and they're not letting the presence of a former first-round pick stop them from drafting somebody who plays the same position and might already be better at that position than he is. So
he wasn't their guy.
And you talk about he was not their guy. Well, I mean, he was John Spanos was one of the guys who picked him. So he's somebody's guy.
You almost want to just forget about him,
No, he's that means exactly that he's nobody's guy. That's exactly what that
means. But I mean, and I love what you said there, Garrett, about they feel like they saw a major progression and he's only going to get better because you could see it in his college tape. I mean, I watched 2 games of him at Penn State, and I was like, oh my God, I got to turn this off. I can't do it anymore. And then you turn on the Auburn tape, and he's making plays all over the field. He's making blocks down the field. He's outrunning people on slants and posts. And there's just
jumping people at 6
out jumping people. There's just a level of dog in him that he just makes those plays. So
just pissing me off, Quentin.
I just love the fact that they're not married to anybody and they're going out there and they're looking to upgrade. And I could totally see this guy being productive in a Z and a slot role right away, just based on what I saw on tape at Auburn, considering we'll just say lack of quarterback play he had to deal with.
Yes.
He's lucky he's still alive.
Agreed.
Okay, so now the Chargers then trade up back into the 5th round for a guy they had to get at the end of this draft. They traded 2 6-rounders, but they end up getting a tight end they were very high on, Oronde Gadsden the second. Jamie, I know that you talked about him as a sleeper. Why don't you start us off?
Yeah, Gadsden was my tight end sleeper when I did the tight end show a few weeks ago. Or when we did the tight end show a few weeks ago. And I think there's a lot of things to like about him. He's not a finished product, and we'll get to that. But you're talking about a guy who's 6'5", 245, former wide receiver, converted to tight end. He had 2 900-plus yard seasons at Syracuse with, I think, 8 or 9 touchdowns both seasons, if I'm not mistaken. He's long, he's lean. There's still room to pack muscle on the frame. He has a huge catch radius, really long arms. He's a big play machine running the seam routes, deep overs and crossers, which if you've been listening to our show and you're familiar with how Greg Roman runs his offense, his tight ends, they eat on those seam routes, deep overs, and crossers, and that's exactly what Gadsden does. He is a legit weapon in the middle of the field. He has a second gear for Yak in the open field. His dad is a former NFL wide receiver, Aranda Gadsden Sr., so he has NFL bloodlines, and he's also been very productive out of the slot. Now we get to why he was a 5th round pick. He runs an extremely limited, unpolished route tree. He will allow corners and safeties to play through his frame on contested catches. He can easily be rerouted by the slightest contact as a route runner. He lacks technique, in my opinion. I think he lacks the technique, desire, and functional strength as a blocker. That's something they're going to have to really work on. And the hands are inconsistent. He'll cut off routes. He'll drop balls. He'll alligator arm balls in traffic. He's just not real excited about contact. So they're going to have to figure out, can they make him stronger, tougher, build him up, and make him that guy that they can trust in the middle of the field to go up and make contested catches. I think the athleticism is there. There's an exciting element to his game and where he wins in the field and how it matches up with how Roman wants his tight ends to win in the field. And he offers something the other tight ends on this roster don't offer, which is speed. So a lot of things to like about him. Plenty to work on, which is why he was a 5th round pick. But yeah, I graded him out as a 63, which was basically, that's like anything in the 60s for me is a day 3 pick, like a late day 3 pick. So, late 4th, early 5th round kind of a pick, which is kind of right where he went. And I think I'm kind of excited to see how they incorporate him in the offense.
Yeah, you can see while watching, because I didn't during our tight end podcast, how those wide receiver traits made it a really easy transition to tight end for him. I love his speed, like getting to top speed to make linebackers nervous with those really, really good hands. He's a natural hands catcher, which I know probably drew you to him, Jamie, because you love nothing more than a good hands catcher. He adds some juice at the top of his routes to burn defenders. Really good in every area of the field, but shines up the seam. He is raw. We saw that. He does not play with very good play strength. I feel like he adds not very much as a blocker right now, which is something he's going to have to build on. And I feel like he's real timid in his contested catch situations. I don't know if it's a confidence thing or a position switch thing, but obviously an area of improvement. And just a fun fact, Gaston was coached by Patrick Surtain's dad in high school at American Heritage. But Harbaugh said that Gaston had a spot right away on this team. And so they got a place to play him day 1. There is some work to be done here. But with that said, this is a 21-year-old with tools, is a true receiving weapon. He's basically a big wideout on the field with a detailed route tree entering the NFL, a ton of versatility as a flex tight end. He could probably line up as H-back, X, power slot.
Definitely X.
Yeah. You could see him lining up all over the field. So the versatility is there. And they needed more receiving weapons in that tight end room. And Rondé Gadsden is one of them. And I was very happy with this pick. You can definitely see betting on those big traits on a young kid. You can see it.
So again, more NFL bloodlines. I mean, we talked about it. His dad had like nearly a decade-long career between the NFL and AFL. So there's that. Now, what I like about Junior, or the second, or however that works, is that he'll make his QB right even when the pass isn't necessarily on target. And those types of receiving threats are invaluable in the NFL, especially in the red zone. So I can kind of see part of the vision for him already. I was really impressed with him and his ability to win in contested catch situations, just kind of by way of using his frame to box out DBs. And I saw some really strong hands to fight through contact at the catch point. But it was selective. It wasn't all the time, but when he did it, yeah, good luck. You weren't knocking that ball out. 9 times out of 10, you couldn't even get your hands on the ball just because he has such like a long frame, long arm. So he's a nightmare for most DBs. He's got enough gas to create chunk plays up the seam, and he'll also give you a little bit extra after the catch, provided he has some runway to work with. If you're asking him to break tackles, that's really not his bag. He's going to need to put on some strength, significant muscle mass to become more of an after the catch threat, more than just like a guy that you throw into space and allow him to get going. The blocking isn't nearly as bad as I expected, and that's mostly due to like his effort, because his frame also really allows him to wall off DBs in space, which is great for ball carriers on the perimeter. So sometimes he would win as a stock blocker just by virtue of him being taller and longer than guys and being able to just kind of stretch a little bit wider to, again, keep them at bay. Almost like sometimes it looked like he was setting like illegal screens in space, but really and truly, the dude just got a lot of length to him, and it made like things very, very difficult for DBs to reach ball carriers behind him or, get around him to maneuver to the ball carrier. And I really love the way he works to space on broken or extended plays. He's got a real knack for making himself available to the QB when the play doesn't necessarily develop as planned. So that's a skill set I'm sure he probably learned from his dad. Like, you have to make yourself available to the quarterback to help them get out of trouble, because not everything goes, again, like I mentioned, as planned. Sometimes these plays break down and you can't quit on it. So I like that. I'm seeing that from a young kid in college right now. It's going to serve him well at the next level. All of his issues are almost like primarily strength related. Like, there's some technique stuff, but he isn't going to break many tackles, like I said before. So his jack's mainly going to come due to being able to run into open space. He can absolutely get owned off of the line of scrimmage by physical DBs. And for a former wide receiver, he isn't all that impressive of a route runner. He rounds off the top of his stems and isn't all that explosive out of his breaks either. I don't think he doesn't have the ability or athleticism to do it. It's just sometimes he seems like he's just disinterested in going all out. Yeah, it was. I don't know. I don't know if that's just a personality thing, like just how he is, or if he just dogs it sometimes on the field, which I can't imagine. And you've got an NFL day, he would allow you to just rest on something like that. It just feels weird. Like, it really pissed me off to see it from time to time, to see the effort that he gave on some plays, and then others just looks like he was kind of like, yeah, blah, whatever. He spent the majority of his time as a split wire, or basically like a glorified big slot net spread offense at Syracuse. So really and truly, until Ben Herbert can make a man out of him, don't ask him to play much in line unless you want your entire play to be blown up due to one person. Overall, though, I mean, Garrett mentioned it. Harbaugh told him on the intro call that he has an immediate plan for him. So my guess is he's going to be a move wide that will like find himself screaming up the seams more often than not, and climbing the ladder or catching like back shoulder fades from Herbert once they get inside of the 20. It doesn't seem like it's rocket science to figure out. So even though you're talking about a player that they got in the later rounds of the draft, it's interesting that he still, just kind of based on his archetype, fits exactly what they need at tight end. He just needs to be groomed and developed. So definitely not a finished product, but they could have something here. And I would not be shocked to see him be a pretty pivotal part of the offense here within the next 2 years.
They liked him a lot through this process. There was once Mitchell Evans was swooped off the board, they felt it was Gadsden and then everybody else, and just punt it until UDFAs. Like, they didn't, and I asked them because Thomas Fidone was still on the board, and they said no. They thought he was a UDFA. So it was like Gaston they liked, and he fell, and they had to stop the slide immediately. And we had talked about it. They were going to try to be aggressive with those extra 6-round picks. And so once they saw Gaston still available, they made sure that they got him, because if not, they were going to be in big trouble. So they got somebody they liked, and they stopped that slide, and they made sure to get one of their guys, and they got him in the 5th round. And I think, they were really happy that they're able to get him, because they really do feel like they can play him day one. They're ready.
Yeah. And it's yet another example, even in the 5th round, of understanding what they need and drafting guys with a very clear-cut, specific role. Like you can look at him and go, okay, this is where he fits. And that's where he's going to fit. Like they've just got it nailed down to exactly what they need and how they're going to go about filling it. And that's not something we're used to as Chargers fans.
Imagine having a plan.
Yeah, totally. A bit, yeah. It feels like, and then when you hear like the backstory of everything, it's like, man, it's like it's just a cherry on top of all of it, Okay, so let's move up or move on, not move up like the Chargers did in the 5th round. They stayed pat and they got their 6th round pick. It is Branson Taylor, the former tackle that they are moving into guard at a Pitt at a 199 overall. Guys, Jamie?
So Taylor is 6'6", 321. He's got a reach of almost 33 inches. So he's just about at that bare minimum reach point for a tackle, but at a perfect spot in terms of his reach for a guard. Some positives for him. He flashes really strong hands and he punches and disrupts defensive linemen with those hands. He's way more agile than you would think. He's really effective climbing and pulling to the second level. Seems to take solid angles and get to his targets at the second level without guys beating him off the spot. Has a really solid anchor, does a good job of dropping the anchor and holding up against power rushers. Plays with pretty consistent inside hand placement against in the run game. And he's effective as a down blocker and a combo blocker. You look at Taylor and you say, that's a guard. You don't really want him on the edge. One, even though the length is okay, he doesn't use it very well. Two, in my opinion, he plays with too much forward lean, makes him vulnerable to a push-pull. You can also see him lose his balance and fall flat on his face against spin moves out on the edge. The feet are just a tad bit too heavy for the edge for my liking. And I think there's some vulnerability to quick inside moves into the B gap off the edge. But overall, what you have here, in my opinion, is a guy who is going to be very successful in the Chargers run game, which is very heavily based in power, gap, and duo. He's going to be able to pull and climb. He's going to get to the second level. He's going to maul and move people in the running game. And then he's going to have plenty of help as a guard to where you don't have to worry quite so much about people either beating him around the edge with speed or leaving him grasping for air with spin moves and push pulls.
Yeah, once they announced that he was going to be a guard, it all kind of made this pick a little bit better because at tackle, you got a lot of concerns, but at guard, you can see it. And then we had kind of talked about, I liked Marcus and Bo during this whole process, and I liked it because he was another tackle moved into guard, but the size, getting another big guy in the interior, and now you've got a 6'6", 320 monster interior guy like Becton with a thick build, and he's got some real pop in his hands. So it's a nice fit when you kick him inside. It feels like when he gets his hands on defenders, he's got a good grip, a good snatch and latch technique. He's really strong when he's got an anchor against power rushers, but a lot of his shortcomings help with the move inside. You talked about his footwork. I feel like it's slow, especially when he's got to get out on the edge and beat those edge rushers to the corner. And also it feels like speed rushers are able to get small around him because he plays a little bit high through his slide. So it feels like all that stuff that you think are problems, and the arm length is also an issue too. When you look at how he is as a tackle, you go, man, this is a guy that's like bottom of the roster. But then you kick him inside and you're like, there's some traits here that might be able to translate in a guy that can compete early on. He did have a season-ending injury this past season, so he is still recovering, but the move inside should help highlight the size and power. The hands are going to translate right away. The anchor will help him too. It feels like this is a guy that can come in and start to compete at left guard in camp. It's going to be a switch early on, but somebody's got to compete with that left guard spot. If they're moving Zion to center and he's there, that left guard spot's open. And while a lot of us thought they would go guard and interior offensive lineman earlier than this, here's another guy that they think can help compete.
So this is just further proof that they have a type. I was thinking about this earlier. If For instance, Taylor did come into camp and compete at guard. Zion Johnson is not a small individual, but in between the two guards he would be playing next to, he'd look like an imp.
Yeah.
And I mean, Rashawn Slater's out there to the side. It's just funny to think of. But so, Jamie, we do this every once in a while. We have like this weird mind meld where all of our notes are essentially the same. So I'm going to try to talk around some of this stuff. But I mean, we know what he did at Pittsburgh. He played tackle, but the dude has guard written all over him. I think also that he's fairly athletic for his size. And that mostly showed up in pass protection with his ability to kind of slide his feet and cut off speed to the edge. I liked his ability to recover and settle down when he would initially lose the power rushes. He dropped his anchor and he'd stop giving way, take maybe about 2.5 steps in. Then he was just kind of locked in and the play was over. Even if he couldn't fully attach to defenders at the second level, he still displayed the quickness and athleticism to wall them off for backs to work and get into the third level. So I like him and the potential for him to be used as like a puller. They could really get interesting with an offensive line that has that type of size and athleticism. It's super rare. Like when you look at his ability to move and you couple that with everything else on that offensive line, you could have one of the biggest and most athletic offensive lines in the entire NFL. Where he needs some help is that his run blocking technique needs significant work. Like he's a strong kid, but he has issues getting his hands on the inside and he'll hold if he can't get appropriate hand positioning. So he's got to get beyond that because once those hands are on the outside, the NFL, they're going to call it. And with him, it's pretty obvious when he loses because his immediate reaction, his initial reaction, the second he loses is to get his hands wide and try to steer them by their shoulder pads. And you cannot have that. He doesn't always seem to trust his ability to contain edge rushes, and he'll actually give up inside rushing lanes due to anticipating outside pressure. So from time to time, he'll overset. And I'm just curious, Garrett, where is he? Did they mention where he is in his recovery from the knee injury? Because that will kind of determine what his availability is to even compete in camp. Otherwise, he's essentially just like a future project.
No, I haven't heard.
Okay. That's why I didn't get a chance to look up. I mean, I think the injury occurred, was it later last year?
It was during their week 6 game, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. So middle of the season, essentially. Okay. I wouldn't be shocked to see Taylor have an opportunity to compete, specifically if they're talking about giving Zion a real chance to play guard, because this level of athleticism, center. This level of athleticism kicked into the guard position gives them a lot of options, and they're going to have some advantages just, again, being able to have so many people of that size that can move as well as they do. Oh, man. If he pans out, this is another steal.
Yeah, they had him scheduled to play in unable to participate in the All-Star game circuit due to a knee injury. So it's still going on. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't able to go to the Senior Bowl or anything. So he's still recovering.
Gotcha.
But no idea how soon. And by the way, speaking of Zion, I think they have like 2 more days to figure out his 5th-year option, and it's been very quiet.
There's no way there.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also, by the way, love the knee brace offensive lineman aesthetic. I'm on it. Like those
I feel like they should wear them no matter what.
Yeah. Seeing those Cowboys teams, like their whole 5 front wearing all knee braces, that's the way to go. All right.
Proactive.
So, yep. Okay, so then we move on to the second 6th round pick. They had 4. They moved down to 2 after moving up for Gadsden. And it is safety R.J. Mickens out of Clemson, 214 overall in the 6th round. Craig, you're a fan of his.
I am. This could potentially be another Tarheeb Still level draft steal. We're talking about a guy 6 foot, just under 200 pounds. Again, another NFL player and apparent long line of former NFL players' sons. Mm-hmm. So he knows and understands defensive back play due to having a pops that played DB for over a decade in the league. Mickens is a coverage asset, and that allows you to convert 2 heavy boxes if you need, and you can feel pretty secure that he's going to not give up really anything deep or cheap as a single high guy. Uh, he has fantastic spatial awareness and he understands angles. And along with that, he's able to recognize route combinations. So he reads the game really well from the back end, which it's not just about your ability to process. He has a feel for it. So I know it's not like one of those innate things like he had passed down from his dad, but it just feels like there's something a little bit different about him. Even during his time at Clemson, I felt like he's a very advanced on the back end, again, at being able to understand route combinations, things of that nature. So he's actually very instinctive in coverage also, which also often puts him in the right place at the right time with the opportunity to make plays on the ball. He doesn't hesitate to jump passing lanes. And again, he kind of has like that innate ability to guess right. So he'll gain an extra step towards the targeted receiver before the QB even releases the ball. He's played nearly as many box snaps, or last year he played nearly as many box snaps as he did in the back third, and he looked comfortable at both. Now, definitely not a perfect prospect, which is why he's here near the end of the draft. So he has a hot trigger when coming downhill and run support. And he doesn't always break down before attempting to make a tackle. So he saw his fair share of whiffs due to either like overrunning a play or not being able to slow his momentum and being juked by like a lateral cut. He'll sometimes lose reps to bigger tight ends when they ask him to defend them one-on-one, just because like he's smaller. So he'll struggle to fight through larger frames as a pass defender. It's not for lack of effort, though. It's just a size issue. And I mean, he'll get caught being overly aggressive, making himself susceptible to like double moves or QB pump fakes. The kid is very aggressive, but sometimes it works against him. More often than not, he's in the right place at the right time, but sometimes he just gets a little greedy. Overall, I think he could be an instant special team stud, and eventually you're looking at your Alohi Gilman replacement, because he sort of has like that similar ability to Alohi with regards to always being around the ball, but he's also a better athlete than Alohi is. So I see him right out of the gate contributing on special teams, being a star there, and potentially next year you're looking at someone who's in the safety rotation if they don't opt to bring Alohi back.
Yeah, he played everywhere at Clemson, being a center fielder, playing in the box, lining up in the slot. I love how Mickens plays downhill, man. A lot of times you'll see him as a deep safety, and then he's going to break on a run and get to the line of scrimmage to make a tackle. And I really like him covering sideline to sideline. He ran 4.5, but he seems a lot quicker on tape than that. He's also a really, really smart DB who plays within phase. You just, while watching the safety class and just college safeties in general, you see a lot of grabbiness. You see a lot of too physical when it's past 5 yards and all that. He does not get grabby. In fact, I ended up looking up. He was only penalized twice in 5 seasons. So he always plays within phase and within the game. And as a free safety, I mean, I know you talked about double moves and getting bit, but it just feels like he always finds the time to recover, and he just doesn't let a lot behind him. He was really good against deep shots. I felt like he always found a way to recover and get back there. He could be better with the ball in the air, and it feels like his tackling is kind of average in the open field. Too often he's just an ankle biter as a tackler, but he has a ton of special team snaps in college, which does not happen very often with starters. He was got a ton of snaps as a coverage team, on coverage teams, block teams, field goal teams, and even as a returner. So he's got a ton of experience as a special teamer, which is going to get him on the field, get him a roster spot pretty early on. So he is scheme versatile. He's going to be a special teamer right away. Could be a rotational guy. You can kind of see, as you're starting to watch him, you can kind of see a path as maybe a Alohi replacement or even a free safety down the road with some work, because he's got that high football IQ, kind of keeps everything in front of him as a center fielder. But I think he'd be a nice piece in cover 2 packages where his role is more like fluid as kind of that versatile extra DB, but could serve as depth early on defense. They needed some DB depth, and they've got it here in Mickens.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you guys are saying. I thought his run support improved from 2023 to 2024. It seemed like his angles improved and he finished a lot more consistently this year than he did last year.
Mm-hmm.
Does a really good job of identifying plays and attacking them, whether it's passes being thrown in front of him or the running play. He's really, really good at attacking the quick passing game. So the tunnel screens, the swing passes, it seems like he's always in the backfield making tackles on those plays. He has really good ball skills, does a really good job of reading the quarterback's eyes and leaping into passing lanes to make plays on the football. I think there's some man coverage flexibility there. I think he can play in the slot. I think where we differ a little bit is I like him in the slot. I like him at box safety. I didn't love him as much playing deep, at least not single high. He does show some good change of direction skills and the ability to adjust his pursuit angles. I saw, because he relies on reading the quarterback's eyes, I think there are times where he can get sucked in, kind of like Alohi does at times, where he gets pulled in too shallow and has to recover. He's able to recover, but you'd like to see him clean that up a little bit. There are times where you can see him kind of following window dressing a lot. He can get caught flat-footed at times watching the quarterback. One of the things that I disliked about him was there were a lot of really bad pursuit angles in the open field. Super aggressive, shallow, not really giving himself a chance to play. Now, he was able in a lot of instances to course correct really quickly and still make the tackle. But he was overrunning a lot of plays at times because of those angles. I think there are times when he plays a little faster coming downhill than he does on the back end in coverage. And I would prefer to see him in a 2-high scheme as opposed to a single high. I think slot and box safety would be really good for him with some 2 deep looks as well.
Okay. Yeah. A guy that's probably going to make it on special teams early, and then they'll have to carve out a role for him somewhere as some DB depth, which is something they were obviously lacking. So, and because they were lacking it, they double dipped. And they added another defensive back in the end of the draft. In the 7th round, 256 overall, it's Triquez Bridges out of Florida. Greg?
Yeah, so the first thing that you notice about Bridges is he has unreal length in coverage. I think he has like a 6'9" wingspan. So imagine a condor playing corner, if you will. The length alone gives him an advantage as a defender. Like with the ball in the air, if he's in striking distance of a receiver, they have almost no chance at outreaching him at the catch point. Now you couple that with sub 4.5 speed, and you have like the archetype of the ideal press cover corner, which is interesting because the Chargers play so much zone, but it's nice to still be able to have that option. He didn't allow a single touchdown last year. Now, he's an older prospect. He's 24, which, I mean, if you're looking at this list in general, I don't know if everybody noticed, but the average age has to be around like 23. I'm just taking a guess right now at what I'm looking at. There's Gaston, who's 21, and then Hampton's 22. Everyone else is 23 and older. So yeah, Bridges falls right in there. I feel like the issue with Bridges is a couple things. So while the speed and the length is intriguing, he's kind of like a corner safety tweener. So he's versatile, but he's not super consistent at either spot. Like the build and athletic ability are top notch, but he isn't the most instinctual defender in coverage either. It's kind of a tease because he has like all of the things that would make up almost this perfect cornerback. I don't necessarily love the safety idea. I kind of get it, but I feel like you definitely want to give him some opportunities at corner. I mean, I did expect him to be a tad more physical. He gives up more ground than I would like to see at the line when he's in a press technique. And with his length, he should also be much better at rerouting receivers off the line of scrimmage, especially smaller ones. So I got in maybe like 2.5, 3 games, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, there's something to work with here. And then I realized, okay, this dude is 6'3". He's got this huge wingspan. He's also 24 years old. He's going to have to make the team if he does on special teams, but also you don't have a ton of time to develop him, and he's still very, very raw. I like the tangibles, but he's kind of old to be a project, if you get what I'm saying. So I get that they can get him in the building and get him on special teams and allow him to use that length again as someone who gets downfield on coverage in coverage situations. But I don't know how realistic a path to real playing time is, if you guys get where I'm going with that.
Yeah, sure. It feels like kind of an end of the depth chart kind of corner safety project. Though I do like him more as a safety than as a corner, a boundary than he is as a safety, even though he played both safety spots and boundary in college.
Mm-hmm.
But because it feels like, with that length, like you talked about, his strength is near the line of scrimmage. Like he's got a really stiff jab at the line. I feel like he helps reset receivers early. And then when there's balls in the passing lane, he's able to get those long arms in there. He's kind of a long strider. And, in the run game, it feels like he's a pretty good tackler, but he still needs some work in that area. And though he ran a 4.45, which everybody's, talking about his RAS score and stuff, I don't think he's that fast on the field. It kind of feels like the opposite of Mickens, where Mickens ran a 4.5 but felt faster. This doesn't feel, because he's kind of a long strider, it feels like he struggles with speed at times. But I also don't like the transitions because of the length and size. The transitions aren't really smooth, as smooth as you'd like as a corner. But I mean, out of high school, he was highly recruited. He set Alabama career records in high school. He had 36 interceptions and 13 pick sixes. He won a state title and was highly recruited. But since then it just feels like he's been a work in progress. And now again, he's an older rookie. He nicknamed himself the Hawk. I don't know if you saw that, but
did not.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I like the Condor better, but I also feel like with the last name Bridges, we can all collectively come up with a better name than Bridges. But I like him as a press corner with the size and length and physicality, but the foot speed and the transitions, I feel like it's just going to hold him back a little bit. But it feels like depth at a DB spot where they kind of need more depth. And it's a nice little gamble when you think about the versatility and some of the desirable size and traits. So I understand it. You're kind of taking a gamble here in the 7th. So it feels like a guy that's going to be competing and going to be on the bubble right away at the end of this DB chart. But maybe can make some noise in camp. Who knows?
Yeah. So looking at him, the first thing I did was I looked up his measurements. I was like, oh, damn, this looks like a press corner.
Yeah.
And then you turn the tape on and he's missing he's missing jams at the line of scrimmage, and he's falling forward and guys are running around him, and he's in the trail position in press way too often. So I feel like the physical traits are there to be a press corner. He's going to have to get stronger. I feel like his feet are just a little bit slow off the line of scrimmage, and he just seems like he's off balance with those press jams, which is super frustrating. But he has a tendency to recover. And like you guys said, with the reach, he doesn't necessarily have to be in phase to make a play on the football. He can get the arms up and bat the ball down, potentially make a play on the football. The tackling's okay, not great, but it's not a complete liability either. I would see him more as a corner than I would as a safety, in my opinion. I guess we'll see how they go about developing him, but you would think he'd have the ability to step on the special teams right away. With that reach and length, maybe you could see guys like him and Gadsden finding roles as designated blockers, like designated guys they want to try to block kicks with their length and reach at the line of scrimmage on PATs and field goals. But yeah, I think there's an opportunity there to develop him. We'll see how it goes, but there's physical traits there that you like. I just think the actual technique and execution needs a lot of work, which is why he's in the 7th round.
And in those end of game, Hail Mary situations, he's 1,000% going to be on the field.
Oh yeah. So that is it for all 9 picks, all 7 rounds. And so we've mentioned a lot of them. We kind of started to tease it at the beginning of the show, but we should probably give grades for this draft class because everybody loves draft grades. Let's talk about this draft class as a whole. Craig, how are you feeling now today after 9 picks? And what is your letter grade for this draft class?
So, like I mentioned when we first got started, I feel like this draft was about identifying or actually solidifying their identity. You saw with a lot of the picks, size, height, weight, speed guys, but they want to be a bigger, more dominant team. And again, I feel like offensively, they want to run the ball down people's throats and then strategically set up shot plays, but they want to literally pound you into submission into the fourth quarter. And by the time it starts, it's going to test teams' wills. So I see the vision there. It's just building upon what started last year. I still think I mentioned this before we started the last pod. People hear certain things and they only gravitate to the thing that they don't agree with. I like the pick of Hampton. Like, I like Hampton, the player. My issue is that the draft was so deep at running back. It was one of the deepest positions that you kind of had to pass up on maybe some of the other positions and you saw them like kind of getting really anxious about players that they wanted that they could have potentially had earlier in the draft and still gotten a back that maybe more so complements what they already have. Like in Najee Harris, you got your power back. You still could have gotten someone that has a little bit of power and a little bit more juice later. But I'm not mad at getting the guy who's like, by a lot of people's opinions, not that far behind the number one guy in the draft. So getting the number 2 running back in the draft, I'm perfectly fine with it. I understand it. Because of the way that they went about it, I can't call it an A draft. I'm going to give it a B+ because overall, I think it is a very good draft. And I understand that how they're building upon the foundation of the type of team that they want on both sides of the ball. And even on special teams, you can see where guys like Mickens are going to come in and find a spot, but also you could see a future path for them getting time on the field in real reps, live reps during the games, not just on special teams. So overall, I think they covered the majority of the bases. Interior offensive line is still in question as far as we're talking like left guard and maybe center, depending on what they do with Zion. We'll see. But yeah, B+ is where I'm going with this one. So I'm fine with it. And it's just another good draft stacked on top of one last year. And I would not be surprised to see some of these late round guys end up being high level contributors just like last year. And then maybe it turns into an A.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be a common theme with the three of us, like we talked about on day one. I don't think the plan to draft a running back is the right way to go in the first round. But I understand it. They felt like it was a starter. They really did get put in a pretty tough spot when Ibuka and Harmon and Barron went, guys in which they really liked. And then you kind of take what you can there. I would have liked to trade down at that point, but I get they got a little spooked because of the Rams and Vikings taking Hampton. But so I like Hampton, obviously. We talked about it. He's a good player. The idea of taking a running back in the first round, I do not love. Trey Harris felt like a home run in the second round. They needed more beef in the middle, so Caldwell helps. I would have preferred a more refined pass rushing interior lineman, but Caldwell is good and he's fine and he will contribute early. Kennard felt like a nice addition in the fourth. They needed to get more speed on the edge. I think he was a great compliment with his length and production. Gadsden feels like a really good pick that could really be a nice value pick in the fifth. And I like the size of Branson Taylor inside and competing. And I like some of the versatility of RJ Mickens. I'm not as high on K Lambo as Chargers Twitter is, but I dig the speed and the route running, and I feel like it's a nice compliment. They obviously have high hopes for him. I think he's going to need to work on his route running to really make an impact in the NFL. And Bridges is just kind of end of the depth chart DB depth, which is fine at 7th round. So they filled all the spots that they were lacking, which is great. But it did feel like after the first round, they were playing catch up the entire time after the Hampton pick. So it felt like the tight end probably should have been picked a little bit earlier. It felt like a guard should have been picked a little bit earlier, but they got Herbert more playmakers. They got a 2-gapping interior D lineman. They got more DB depth. So it's exactly what we were hoping for. Maybe not in the order we wanted. So I think I'm with Craig. I'm giving it a B+. The draft plan makes sense. There's some real players to be excited about. Just probably not the order I would have preferred, but I think it's a B plus draft.
Yeah, I'm teetering between a B plus and an A minus. I'm at like
Mhm.
an 89.5.
Mm-hmm.
Right
Round
on
it up,
the
man.
edge.
Yeah. What kind of professor are you going to be? You going to round that up, or are you tight on the
I'm rounding
grading
it down
scale?
right now.
Oh no.
No, I like the draft though. I think overall, like we've talked about with pretty much all the picks, they identified clear, specific needs, and they went about going out and filling them. I like the fact that they overhauled the wide receiver room basically in one draft. The running back pick in the first round, didn't love it, but if he was the highest rated player on their board and they feel like he's an immediate starter, I'm fine with it. I think he's going to be a good player. I do have some Melvin Gordon flashbacks, so I don't love that.
Oh God,
I'll hang on to that. But my only real two, I won't even say complaints, criticisms, constructive criticisms. Like Garrett said, I would have preferred an actual pass rusher as an interior defensive lineman. Now, the way things broke, they couldn't really get one. But if they were prioritizing a defensive tackle, that's what I would have preferred to see them prioritize. I understand wanting to stop the run. I understand needing beef inside. It's fine. I think there's a good chance Caldwell contributes on first and second down early on. So no real issues with that. My only other real constructive criticism is I would have liked to see a corner who can come in and compete for playing time right away a little bit earlier in the draft. I feel like that's a need that we've been talking about for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and they really haven't done anything early in the draft or in free agency to address it. They did hit on Still and Hart last year. We'll see if Hart stays healthy. But I just feel like they need more high-end competition at the cornerback position. But it seemed like they traded that for finding finding Kennard in a situational rusher who's going to help hopefully help elevate them on third down. So fair trade-off there. I like the KLS pick. I think he can come in and contribute as a Z pretty much right away. The route running doesn't need to improve, but I think he's going to be a pretty solid NFL player. Gadsden just fits like a glove for what they want their tight ends to do. So that makes so much sense. And then those last 3 picks, I think they make sense in terms of what they're looking for and how they're trying to fill those roles. So 89.5 for me, very solid B plus, just a little bit under an A minus. They had a plan, they executed it. They continue to fill specific needs with specific fits and plans for these guys up and down the draft. It's pretty clear, which I like. I'm not used to it, but I'm enjoying it.
No, because
can they get extra credit for any of the UDFA signings that push it up to like a 90?
I've been watching the UDFA.
Rocket Sanders would do it for me. It would get that 0.5 up to a 90. Because
why don't you do yours? Make yours the name.
Well, I didn't have it like a number grade. I just gave him a B plus. So I mean,
so he was more like an 87.
Yeah.
It could have been like an 88. Yeah, 87, 88.
No. Yeah, it does. It is almost foreign that there wasn't like a linebacker in the third for no reason. And then we're all going, well, what the hell are we doing now? And why are they, there was all a clear picture, a very tight, succinct plan. Even if it wasn't in the order we liked, we understood it all. It all made sense. And it all was part of a plan that was making this team stronger depth wise and better in areas that they needed to improve in. And while, they couldn't improve everything in one entire draft, there are still weak areas, it feels like, in this roster that hopefully maybe during cuts or I don't know, still in free agency later, they can get somebody, but there is some room improvement in a couple position groups here still.
Yeah, they're still thin in the secondary. They still need to address interior offensive line, in my opinion. Still need that interior pass rusher. So definitely some things to work on.
Yep.
Ortiz said it. Free agency never ends. So I would not be surprised to see something significant happen in between now and once camp gets rolling. So
yeah, there was a name floating. Will Hernandez was floating around early in free agency.
Yeah,
he is still available. So
what was there an injury there?
There is an injury, and he's primarily a right guard, so that may be why that hasn't happened.
Still, what? Who's available? Brandon Scherf and what? Shaq Mason? Are those two still out
I
there?
think Shaq. I think Shaq signed. I think.
Okay.
I'd have to look that up. But just touching on the thing we were talking about with Branson Taylor, it was week 6, like JB mentioned, and it was a torn meniscus was the injury.
I had one of those.
Yeah. How long did it take?
I still feel it a little bit today because I never got surgery on it, but I was still able to play with it, which is weird. But I also have a very high pain tolerance. I wouldn't advise doing that though, but it is what it is.
You were right. Shaq Mason is still available.
Okay.
So was Dalton Reisner, as the chat just suggested. Not that I want him, but there are some guards available if they want to do it. Shaq Mason is strange because he was actually pretty good for the Texans.
Yeah,
they got him for financial reasons, but
he was good. Well, he was a Patriot before he was a Texan, right?
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, he was a very solid player and got to Texas last year. I think, well, not last year, but I think last year he just kind of fell off of a cliff a little bit.
I remember watching Shaq Mason on that offensive line compared when he was off of it for the playoff podcast, and Shaq Mason made that Houston line so much better. But who knows?
Do we have like a quick second to answer our super chats? I didn't want to forget those.
Oh yeah, go for it. Go for it. Are you? Is this what you wanted to answer? Could one gorilla beat 100 Joe Alts? Is that what you?
Where is this coming from? I've seen that all over social media today. I haven't taken the chance to look at it, but yeah, this gorilla versus 100 people thing. Where did this come from?
It popped up. Some guy was like very, very adamant that 100 normal people could beat a gorilla without weapons, by the way, which is insane. You cannot, they're so underestimating a gorilla's strength.
Yeah.
And then also, and he said the reason why he thought so is that if he had 100 dedicated people to try to kill this gorilla, that they could do it. But if like anybody chickened out and it wasn't like actually 100, like once one human got ripped in half, like it feels like
it'd be over.
Yeah,
everybody's bailing.
Like, wait a minute, we need to reconsider this plan.
No, I ain't doing that. Yeah,
I'm good.
Right. But he said if I had 100 dedicated people to fight a gorilla, we could win. But I still don't.
But you won't.
You won't. No, you won't. You cannot overwhelm a gorilla of that size. So anyway, but Joe Alts, I don't know, man. That's one strong dude. Good size, strong hands. I don't know, man. So, but anyway, super chat. Brian, specific. Oh, I wonder why you wanted to answer this. Specifically, Craig.
What? I didn't see this.
Our O-line. I'm kidding. I need your take on our O-line. We need to make a trade or signing for a free agent before season starts? I think we just talked about it, but
that's interesting. Yeah, we just touched on that. I would not be opposed to kicking the tires on one of these guards. Seeing what Shaq Mason still has left in the tank. Brandon Scherf, I've always kind of gone like hot and cold on him. Sometimes I've thought he was okay. Other times just like, And Will Hernandez, like Jamie mentioned, he's primarily played right guard. I give him a shot at left guard. If he's back healthy, why not?
Okay, who wants to read this? Who wants to read a Thier's comment in all caps? Craig, you want to yell it at us?
Why are you screaming at us?
I don't know. But it is a yearly reminder that he thinks Herbert's going to the Super Bowl, and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. All right, Thier. Hi, guys. I'm giving my GM a plus firepower. What? Oh, sorry. Thanks.
An A+.
Firepower. A+. Oh.
A+.
There you go. I totally butchered that.
That's okay.
Thanks. I'm expecting.
Yeah, you didn't butcher it, dude.
I'm doing my best to read to read in a Thier.
Yeah.
To Herbie to play in the SB Super Bowl, San Fran. Here we come. Let's go. Am not scared. Bolt up. Well, Thier, tell you what. Yeah, I appreciate the enthusiasm, and I would love it if it led us to a Super Bowl this year and every other year that you predict us to go. Eventually, you're going to be right. So I do appreciate your consistency and the enthusiasm. Just stop yelling at us. when you send these in.
Everything's in all caps all the time. All right, guys. Well, I think that's good. We're over 2 hours and we covered the entire draft class in depth. I appreciate you guys. Thanks everybody for joining us through this whole draft process. It's been crazy trying to get the three of us together this year, but we're going to keep grinding and hopefully we'll have a little bit more time next year. So appreciate you guys. We got it all out. We're done and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Salute.